Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Christian Wyman and want to welcome you here on behalf of the Institute for Sacred Music. This is our annual Lana Schwebel Lecture in Religion and Literature. Lana Schwebel was a beloved member of this community. She died in 2007, very young. Our format for tonight is this. Will Arbery will speak to us for 20 minutes or so, and then he and I will engage in conversation. And then we'll take questions from you guys. If you have any questions, get them ready. And then we have a small reception afterward where I'm sure he's happy to sign books. We have his books out there and to talk to you. I do have to say that my own burgeoning artist daughter is performing in a play this evening. And so I have to kind of bolt during the reception. So it's not rude. It's just my fatherly duties. Will Arbery is a playwright and screenwriter. His plays include Heroes of the Fourth Turning, which was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, actually. Corsicana, Evanston Salt Costs Climbing, Plano, Wheelchair, You Hateful Things, and Spite House. Those last two are upcoming. His awards include a WGA Award for Episodic Drama, a Whiting Award, an Obie, Lucille Lortel, and New York Drama Critics Circle, and he's currently under commission to write things for the Manhattan Theater Club and the Metropolitan Opera. He was a writer and producer on Succession and Irma Vep, two HBO shows that I'm sure you guys know. But he also has a film called Sacrifice, which is going to be released later this year, and it's going to star Anya Taylor-Joy, Chris Evans, Salma Hayek, Brendan Fraser, and I think John Malkovich?
Not Brendan Fraser anymore.
Oh, really? He dropped out. But all those others.
Yeah.
It's a big film, and we'll all be seeing it. And as Will said in my class that he visited yesterday, he's a very different person in his life than he is in his art. And in person, as you'll see, he's quiet. He's understated, he's straightforward, he's unfailingly kind. In his work, he can be a bit rougher and stranger. People wound each other deeply. They act out of deep shame and aggression, and sometimes even the furniture gets involved and starts to talk to each other. One time, actually. There's a great deal of love in his plays, though, or potential for love, and what moves me most is the kind or kinds of faith that emerge in his plays, which is exactly why we have him here reading in this series. He said that for him, creating characters is a form of prayer, which you can bet I'm going to ask about when we have our conversation. But for now, please give a warm welcome to Will Arbery.
Thanks, Chris. That was really nice. Yeah, I know that the Institute of Sacred Music isn't literally all about music, but I became obsessed with. I just love that name for an institute, and so I became obsessed with music, and because sacred music feels like exactly what I'm trying to create in my scripts, whether it's a play or a film or a TV pilot or a libretto. I want to create works that create a space for the transcendent to enter, and experiences that allow for a collective surrender to the unknowable. So even though I was asked to write about faith, it feels like everything I write is about faith. I mean, just as a little background, I come from a big Catholic family in Texas. I have 7 sisters. I went to a school run by Hungarian monks for 8 years. You know, our family friends were priests, including a literal exorcist. I wanted to be a priest when I was a boy. You know, it's all in the work. And like Chris said, I do consider my writing to be a form of prayer, even when my practice of religion seems to be flagging or non-existent to my mom's chagrin. I do feel like when she, presses me for an answer to what's going on with my soul, I tell her in full earnestness that I write to talk to God, and I leave a lot of space in my work for God to talk back, even though I have no assurance of that being something that can actually happen. Another way of saying this is that there are always things in my work that I don't understand, and I don't understand them on purpose. And I know what the specific components are. I can defend the presence of those components, but I don't know what they mean. And I don't understand music. What does music mean? I feel it. It goes beyond language. The vibration of music to me feels like a bridge between up here and down there, or down here and up there, between man-made patterns and cosmic ones. There's a character in my play, Evanston Salt Costs Climbing, who's quoting Jane Jacobs, and she says, "A city is organized mystery. If you can understand a city, then it's already dead." And to me, she could be talking about art just as easily. My artistic mission is centered around not understanding. And I try as hard as I can to understand, to make things make sense, to have a form, to have a satisfying conclusion. But I also want the work to be alive. And to me, that means not understanding it. And this feels like a kind of faith, or at least the kind of faith that I can practice right now. And of course, I hope that this leads to some sort of spiritual satisfaction, trust, peace, harmony, redemption, forever and ever, amen. But when I look at what my instruments are, or what my notes are, the broken down components of the music I'm composing, it's people. And I'm writing about people, and I'm writing for other people to pretend to be those people. And people are very, very unsatisfied and unsatisfying. Drama feeds on conflict, discord, unease, contradiction, and failure. I want to make sacred music, but I have to make bad things happen to these people. And they're sometimes, if not often, lost, crude, drunk, vomiting, manipulative, self-centered, duplicitous, suicidal, or downright evil. And on top of that, I have to let them take over the works that I'm writing. I can't force them into salvation. They didn't ask to be part of any sacred music. And even if that idea sounds appealing to them, I think they often feel too ordinary to rise to the occasion. Like me, my characters didn't ask to be born. Like me, my characters believe that they exist or hope that they do. And like me, my characters feel the presence of something bigger than themselves, just beyond the lip of the stage, so close they could almost touch it. They feel watched, like an invisible tribunal is sitting in judgment of them. I am doing this to them. I am their creator, and I'm deeply uncomfortable with it. I've read what happens in the myths about mortals who play God. I tried to write about this. I try to write about it often, but there's a part in my play Plano, there's a character, a mother, who's talking to her daughters, her 3 daughters. And she says, and this is, I'm just gonna, say some things and I'm gonna quote different parts of plays. She says, "Your father and I have the perfect marriage. We've been traveling around to fundraise for our Catholic vision. We've been on the road for 30 years, going from conference to conference. We see a way that the world can be, and we've been showing people that world. A tiny world without end. A tiny world without end that we keep in a box. Want to see it?" She takes out the small box and shows it to them. They all look. Isn't it beautiful? They all sort of nod. Look, there you three are. They look closer, and she snaps the box shut. She says, there was a real buzz around our tiny world without end. People were buying in, and we felt all this energy. We had a second youth. We were going to live forever, and our tiny world was going to become the incarnate world, a new republic, an invisible empire of liberty and duty and form, a form in God's image, a form that never disintegrates. I don't want to be responsible for the fate of my tiny worlds, and yet I do feel responsible. And so I have to build in prayers. I have to create pockets of unknowing. Unlike the character that I just quoted, who thinks that she's got it all figured out, I have to build in some surrender. I have to let go, to die. And I've noticed that in all of my scripts, music is the bridge into that surrender. I can't preordain that my characters or my works will end in salvation. I don't have that power, and so I often situate my scripts on the border between the sacred and the profane, right where the two almost touch, right at the thin invisible line which plunges down into a dimensionless abyss. So I'd love to read a handful of moments from my plays and locate these moments of surrender and how they collide with music. So in the note before my play, Heroes of the Fourth Turning, I call it a fugue, a musical composition for a number of voices in which each subject is announced in one voice, initiated or imitated in succession by each of the other voices, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, and interweaved contrapuntally until the climax, but also the psychological state, a state or period of loss of one's awareness of one's identity, often coupled with flights from one's usual environment. I decided to put that note there after I'd written the play. I didn't realize I'd done that until late in the process. I overheard people talking about two definitions of fugue, and I realized that's what I was after. Late in the play, these four young religious conservatives are interrogating their mentor, and she says, "Honey, of course we allow for different conclusions, but to focus on the conclusions is to miss the point. What we're after is the slow pursuit, the thrill of reason and rhetoric, prayer and poetry, a slow working out, taking apart the clock and putting it back together, hearing the music of its ticking with fresh ears and precise new understanding, and God let the understanding be slow." And in the moment, the characters all seem sort of hypnotized by that, and they say, yeah, that's great, that's what we're doing, that's what it is. But in the end, the sweetest character in the play invokes music of her own in an impassioned, pain-fueled monologue. One of the things she says is, "You don't know how dangerous this is. It's too dangerous. Don't try to feel this. It'll kill you. It won't solve anything. Leave me to die. Get away from here. Help me, oh God. Get me out of this. Get me to the water. Turn it off. The song is over. And I'm still here, and I'm just me." In my play, Evanston Salt Costs Climbing is about 3 winters in Evanston, Illinois, and the truck drivers and public work administrator who are tasked with salting the roads. But it's really about dark energy, about the thing underneath everything that wants us to die, about a creeping sense of dread and the attempt to find meaning despite it. There are these 2 truck drivers, Peter and Basil, and they have a rapport together that's built through the years. They have a profanity-ridden back and forth that takes on the quality of music. But underneath that is a deeper yearning, and the character of Peter articulates it. He says, "They should write a thing about what it's like on the roads with the salt, like about what it's like out there when we're salting the roads. I think it's cool when we salt the roads. Sometimes people honk at us. Things fall down. The light's always changing. I think the noises when it hits the road is good. We have funny conversation in the front. It's cold. We get an article written about us, and that's what they write. They don't even have our names in it. Fucking Mayworm gets her name in it. I was just trying to think about how it might be cool to have a thing about Peter and Basil, a story, but instead of written with words, it's written with sounds and ice that tell the story of Peter and Basil." Later in the play, we see what he means. The 2 of them create a music out of sounds and ice, and they do this together all the time. It's incredibly precise music down to the syllables and their ha-ha-has and their F-bombs and their okays. In the harsh winters, this co-created music has the effect of warming them up, saving their lives, and creating a friendship worth fighting for. My play Corsicana is directly about music. It's about the creation of a single song. A brother connects his Down syndrome sister with a local outsider artist. He wants this artist to help his sister make a song that's hers, And it seems simple at first, but it proves impossibly difficult. But then something somewhat miraculous happens, which is that the 4 characters in the play make a collective song. And they might not even do it in real life, but they do it in the play. They do it for us. And it's the happiest ending I've ever written. It starts with the woman with Down syndrome, Ginny. She makes a tape recording for the outsider artist named Lot, and it has spoken instructions for a song. She fails, she gets frustrated, and then she says, nobody is ever gonna hear this song. Nobody is ever allowed to hear this song, which of course becomes the song that we hear. The lyrics are, nobody is ever gonna hear this song. Nobody will be allowed to hear this song, because I'm singing it to myself and you can't hear it when I sing to myself. This becomes an inexplicable group song made of rough music. The character of Justice, who has never expressed any interest in being part of the making of this song, chimes in. A song is a family. It escapes to beyond you. You get something you sure weren't looking for. And you walk through a door to a place where you've never been before. The land of the dead. The land of the dead. They rise up to gut you. You let them gut you. You're just ordinary folk. They're just ordinary folk, just like you and me, worried about bullshit, feeding on mystery. Then you find a shape, and that shape becomes you. And that shape is called a family. And the shape is a song, and the song is a failing. This song is a failing, a family. My play Wheelchair is about a man who's been forced to leave his apartment because the building is being demolished. He leaves some pieces of furniture behind which start to talk after the man is finally left. The other furniture gets taken and only a sad, self-loathing chair is left. He's alone and it's devastating. And then the fridge suddenly comes back to life and immediately starts singing Barbra Streisand. I'm not gonna sing it, but it's "Where is the wonder that I once felt? Watching snowflakes melt as a child. Where is the wonder that I once knew? When the sky of blue turned wild." And the chair says, "Fridge, is that you?" And the fridge says, "What happened? Was I singing?" "Yeah, you were singing." "Oh, wow, I was singing." "Are you okay?" "I thought I was dead." "Oh, yeah, I thought you were too." "Oh my God. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I mean, I was singing. How did I sound?" "You sounded pretty good." "Wow." A bit later, the chair says, "Have I ever told you? I want to be a wheelchair." "Oh yeah, why?" "Well, because of the, think about it." The fridge says, "No, tell me, just tell me." Chair says, "A wheelchair is needed." Fridge, "Oh yeah?" "Yeah, and they see the world, and they dance, and they're needed." "A chair is needed too." "Yes, some of them, but I'm not. I'm just not. I'm just a non-being." Fridge, "No, oh man, no. It's funny, What? "I don't know, I guess I just, yeah, it's sad. I can tell you're, yeah, I've been there. But then I woke up from the dead, and I was singing. Didn't know that was gonna happen. And I think I smell okay, too." In my play Plano, which I mentioned earlier with the tiny worlds, I have a note at the beginning that says, "This play goes very fast. It lives or dies by its metronome." And I even specify it should be around 77 minutes. It's intensely musical. It has highly specific language that moves at a rapid pace. It has dances with highly specific instructions like this. Faceless Ghost, that's a character, Faceless Ghost, dances with Isabel, who doesn't know she's dancing with it. The dance is an unholy mansplain, and the mansplain is about disease and God and sex and pain. But he doesn't overpower her. He's weirdly tender. Is he falling in love? Isabel's very sick. She's trying to get to the toilet. The toilet is his lap. She falls through the toilet. She hurts her shoulder. She slides to the floor. He yanks her up. Faceless Ghost dances with Isabel, who doesn't know she's dancing with it. The whole piece builds to an outpouring of 4 breathless arias, the 3 sisters, and then the mom. Anne says, "And Mom, at a certain point, I stop knowing how to talk about myself. It becomes a pathology. I can only ask other people about themselves. And when they ask me about myself, I smile and deftly make it about them. I do this for the rest of my life, until people don't even think to ask me anymore, until one day I forget my own name, and I'm invisible even to my child. So I call you and you don't answer. So I get in the car and start driving. And while I'm on the road somewhere in Oklahoma, I suddenly see up ahead in a pool of light an enormous beast oozing." Genevieve cuts her off. And Mom, I'm trapped in Dallas. I'm trapped in Dallas forever because of the divorce settlement. I'm never allowed to leave. I'm never allowed to live in Iceland or run a museum in the Berkshires. I have to stay within a certain North Texas radius. And so I keep switching homes. I live in every possible vector of that radius until one day I start to long for Plano. I pine for Plano. I move to Plano. I start selling real estate in Plano and grow my hair big and blonde and grow my boobs big and blonde and forget how to make art. And when I tell you this, your eyes flutter back fast, flutter back fast, flutter back, and your tongue starts to turn into a red ribbon. Isabel cuts her off. And Mom, I love you, but you locked me in a room with God. You said, here's a God who loves you, and you didn't tell me it might be a God who hates me too or ignores me. You made me fall in love with God, and you didn't tell me what to do once it started hurting all the time. And so one of the boys who loved me would do a thing to me. In the middle of the night, this Christian boy who loved me would do a thing to me, and I never consented to being a saint. And sometimes I violate God, Mom. Sometimes I do. I violate. I carve things into the God who loves me, and I don't tell you this until a panic attack when I'm 44 and you're very old, and you start crying and the tears stay bunched up in front of your eyes like a windshield made of moving water. And the mother cuts her off and says, and I had a mother too, believe it or not, and I sat at her feet too, believe it or not, and I asked her if the world was ending, and it never was, and it always was. Oh, somewhere my mother, she's sitting on a Duncan Fife waiting for him, dressing up for him. Somewhere I'm little and there's a Chinese jacket and cocktails and small shoes with thin ankle-length black silk pants. I wear them like Mother for Father and think about 2-inch heels and little diamond earrings and stay with Mother on the couch with her legs, try to make her legs shine, try to help her smell like better sex than the sex on his breath. And if it isn't sex on the breath, then it's just the breath itself, always exhaling, grumpy, and fogging up the good china. And then he's gone. So sit there all night for another 30 years. Remember everything you can about the steel inside her veins. Remember everything you can about her. And I would work on my tiny world and say, why are you waiting? And she would say, for your father. And I, why? And she, why not? And I, my father. You're waiting for my father, but you're my mother, and I can't be like this, so I'm cutting loose. Yes, I'll change the world. I'll work forever, and I'll sleep through the night, and I'll never marry, and I'll never... That's the end of that one. And here's a couple of quick ones from plays that haven't been produced yet. My new play, Spite House. In the middle, there's a long ayahuasca ceremony, all of which is underscored and informed by music. At one point, a character named Clementine is freaking out, having a sort of exorcism. And she says, in the jungle, the way it comes alive, it all starts screaming. I hear it as war. The shaman says, it's music. She says, it's pain. It's trying not to die. The shaman says, it's music. And then in You Hateful Things, which is about a white dad in Texas who has biracial children who discover a box in the basement, inside of which is a man in a diaper who spews out a long vitriolic monologue about all the things he hates about them. And it's the worst shit you've ever heard. And they realize that this man in the diaper is a vessel of their father's hatred. And so they separate him from their father, who undergoes withdrawal and then quickly dies. And on his deathbed, his daughter is trying to help him. And when he starts having death rattles, she says, what's happening? And he says, they're coming for me. And she says, who? And he says, the opposite of a choir. They're singing the opposite of music. And this idea of the opposite of music has become my new obsession. I've implemented it in the libretto that I'm writing for this opera for the Met. I've been working on it for the past couple years, and it's probably not going to premiere for at least another 3 years. It's the longest, most challenging process I've ever been a part of. But it's about a lot of things, but it's called Demons. It's based on a book by Dostoevsky. And the main character is a man who's done a very, very bad thing, like one of the worst things a person can possibly do. He's part of a movement, meanwhile. It's a revolutionary and noble movement to some, but it's gleefully nihilistic and destructive to others. It has intricate plans for how to destroy his hometown from the inside. And he's sort of the leader of it, but he can't commit to the plan because of this horrible thing that he's done. Even though he's intellectually moved beyond the issues of guilt or religion or even morality itself, he's willed himself into a vision of eternal harmony, ecstatic visions of endless light. And then a tiny red spider shows up every time and ruins the vision. And he's obsessed with this tiny red spider. It's driving him crazy. he can't commit to the plan, people are telling him to either stop the movement or push it forward, and he is basically paralyzed until it's too late. At one point while he's dreaming, his mother sings an aria over his sleeping body. And this, to me, is the purest expression I've written about what I mean when I say music is a bridge between up here and down there. She says, "How do we reach them? Is it wrong? Is it terribly wrong to want him with me in heaven? And if he doesn't join me, if he cannot join me, will they banish me from heaven? I do not know him. How did I come to fear him? And why now do I need him with me in heaven? How do I reach him? How do I build a bridge? If I go to heaven, if they let me into heaven, and my son ends up in hell, will there be a bridge? Will they let me walk the bridge down to my son?" At the end, the chorus begs this young man, Nikolai, to end this cycle by joining them and letting them absorb his sin into theirs, letting himself forgive and be forgiven. Surprisingly, the chorus gets down on their knees and begs Nikolai for forgiveness. He ignores them because of his pride. He cannot allow himself to be humbled by redemption, so he hangs himself. And while calling out to the tiny red spider that haunts him, there's a moment of stillness. And then the chorus laments that the cycle will repeat. Why do our most brilliant children succumb to such darkness? Together, the chorus prays in fragments, hoping that God is watching. I know that's how it ends, but I don't know yet what the music will sound like. Thank you.
That was amazing. That was great.
I'm usually a lot funnier than that, but I think it's just a dark time right now.
No, that was I was fascinated by that. I want to know first about the idea of music, because you talk about plays the way that poets talk about poems, and I mean I've heard you elsewhere say that you feel a play's rhythm before anything else, and I mean, I know what that means in poetry, but like, what does it mean in a play? To hear a play's music.
I think for me, what it means is, when you see a play, you're showing up to a room. You have an appointment with a room, and you're sharing that appointment with other people and the people doing the thing. And so it's really just as simple as that. It's the fact that your breath is going to be a part of the air in that room, and everyone else's breath is going to be part of it too. And so it feels like, to me, the very first task that I have is to think about what to do with that air, and in order to make it a satisfying experience. When I look back at the theatrical experiences that I've been most moved by, most compelled by, you feel like everybody's breathing at the same rhythm. You feel like the thing, like you're forgetting to breathe, or you're all laughing at the same time. There's like a symphony of breath happening, and if I can get everyone to breathe the same, then there's a sort of collective experience that happens. So it's really about breath for me. It's about knowing how the play breathes, and then how I want the audience to breathe in response.
So that's occurring to you at the onset of a play. Like when you say you feel the rhythm of a play, you're actually feeling the audience at that time and not just the play?
Yeah, I would say I have to start writing it a little bit to start to figure out what it is. It's not the very first thing that I think about, because I have to have some idea. I have to have a setting or, you know, a basic kind of dramatic construction, or just, you know, these kinds of people in this kind of place. There has to be something to get it going. But then I can't finish it, and I can't keep writing it until I figure something out about its breadth. Yeah.
Oh, it's fascinating
Yeah.
to me. You know, the painter Kandinsky once said, "The world sounds. It is a cosmos of spiritually effective beings. Thus, dead matter is living spirit." And then I also think of another guy, Oscar Fissinger, who wrote in a note to John Cage, "Every single thing has a soul that can be released by its sound." And so for me, when I think of sound, it is something that is connecting us with something other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, God.
Yeah.
Do you see that in your play when you talk about rhythm and sound? Or?
I mean, I think it's the pursuit of, you know, that's what I want to happen. But again, you know, it also has to be full of surprise, and that surprise usually comes in the form of, you know, disruption and contradiction and conflict. So if I'm only thinking about God the whole time, I'm not going to let people be people, because we're not thinking about God the whole time, you know. So it has to get grubby, it has to get dirty, it has to get gross, you know, because that's what we are.
Is that what you mean by the opposite of music, or is that something else?
Well, the opposite of music has started showing up for me in various works as like as something even darker than that. I think it's like I think it's like an embodiment of evil that has just started showing up, because the subject matters that I'm taking on are more aggressively they're spiritually braver than other things that I've worked on before, and so the opposite of music has started to show up as like the antagonist. It's like the personification of dread. It's like the big nothing in Neverending Story. You know, it's trying to destroy the thing I'm writing while I'm writing it. It's showing up and saying, "Don't do this. Don't look at this. Don't show people this. It'll kill you." That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Gosh, that's fascinating. Do you think that noise, for those of you who don't know the play Heroes of the Fourth Turning, there is this loud noise that just occurs.
Yeah, that's probably
several times. Is that like a prelude to that?
Yeah, it must have been. Yeah, totally. Yeah, definitely.
Huh. You said that writing characters is a complicated form of prayer. I wonder what you mean by that.
Yeah, I just mean that. I guess all I mean by that really is that if I were only talking to people, then I wouldn't be satisfied. I wouldn't feel like I was done. I do always have to feel like I'm talking to something bigger. Not the whole time. Again, not the. It's the whole thing isn't a prayer. It's like there's pockets. That's why it's complicated. There's pockets of it. There's moments of it where that kind of breaks through and invites something else in, and yeah, that's really all it is.
You don't feel like is there ever like a godlike feeling of creating characters? I mean, that's what's unusual to me about that statement, is that it's a form of prayer, because when you hear people talk about creation, it's usually the sense of creating characters is the same as creating people. And so like you're in control of them somehow. but you're casting it very differently.
Yeah, because I feel super weird about that, you know. Like I don't want to. I don't. All pretty much all of the best things that I work on are the things that end up lasting the longest or resonating the most with people, are ones that I'm like pretty conflicted about while I'm writing them, and I'll often want to quit or think that it's you know, and this is ingrained, you know, Catholic schoolboy in me, but I'll think that it's evil that I'm doing it at all, and pushing through that feeling often involves, you know, it could be anything. It could be a moment when it feels like the project will go away and not happen, and I'll realize how much I actually want it to happen, and suddenly I'm convinced that it'll actually heal all these divides and be a good thing for the world, and it'll bring more beauty into the world, and I'll like suddenly start fighting for it. Or I'll have a conversation with someone who inspired the play, and it'll bring us closer together, and I'll feel like, oh, okay, this is a healthy kind of confrontation that's going on here. Usually there will be some sort of sign that I should keep going, but it feels like I don't know. It feels like a vocation that I didn't ask for. That, you know, that was just sort of like revealed itself to me. Sort of when I was younger and I wanted to be a priest. It feels like kind of a version of that, but instead of saying the mass, I'm like writing stories that make people feel bad about themselves, and then hopefully, you know, creating an experience that treats uncomfortable things with generosity and creates space for them to go off afterwards and wrestle with it and feel safe to feel feelings that maybe they didn't know other people felt. And I don't know. Yeah, I forgot what the question originally was.
No, you answered it. I'm thinking of, we were talking today of Fanny Howe, and you're gonna love her when you read these books. But she says, "What was it that I was called to? A vocation that has no name," which is just what I thought when you said that. The vocation that has no name, like you don't know exactly what it was. I know a lot of artists art becomes like their entire spiritual life. I mean, that happened to me for a number of years. I wonder how that has worked out for you. Is it your entire spiritual life? Is that a problem, or you?
It has been, but I don't think it is right now. I think, you know, there are moments when I really do. You know, I had this whole I had this real burnout. I talked to you about last night. This kind of, I was working too hard and I had lost the joy. At the end of 2022, I had this kind of burnout mental breakdown where it just felt like I just didn't like any of it. And I had so much to do, and I didn't like it anymore, and I didn't like myself, and I didn't like what, you know, it just felt like this grabby pursuit of more and more, and I ended up accidentally going on an ayahuasca retreat, and like I didn't know that's where I was going, but then I got there and found out that's what it was and decided to just do it. And during that, really what one of the main things that happened was I completely let go of the idea of continuing to do any of this at all anymore. I had to let go of ambition. I had to sort of, you know, become okay with not being an artist anymore, and it was completely liberating. And since then, there has been something slowly working itself out inside of me sometimes. I mean, my wife doesn't even know this, but sometimes I'll say these prayers from childhood as I'm falling asleep, and they'll sort of comfort me into sleep, or I'll go, I'll pray for my family one by one, and there are these things showing up, and I think it's informed by the work. I think part of it is that like I am pushing into really scary spiritual territory in a couple of my projects, and my dad said something to me, when I was visiting last year, where he said, if you're going to write about that, you need to make sure you're spiritually protected. And it just got to me, and I've started. I don't know. I've just started praying more for no reason other than to do it, but I haven't told anyone that until right now.
I once did that. I did that exact same thing in a conversation. Reveal that exact same thing, but in a conversation like this. I wonder. You said you gave up the ambition of being an artist, but does that? You have plays in production. You're doing all this television work and movie work. You don't consider that artistry, or
no, I it's a hard distinction to make, but yeah, no, I'm making television shows. I made a movie. Like, obviously I didn't give it up. It's like I gave up something. Maybe it's like I had to I had been living as my entire self-worth, my value as a human, was wrapped up in whether or not I was making good art, and whether I was, at that. So and then this experience brought me to a place of no, I am worthy of life, even if I'm not doing that. And it just made everything easier, and it made things, it just became a lot more healthy mentally. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it less intense for you psychically to work on the television shows or the?
No.
It's the same.
It's like worse than, it's.
Really?
Yeah, because so many more people are going to see it.
But you're not. Well, I was thinking you're not creating it wholesale. Like when you're in a writer's room at Succession, that's sort of bouncing idea. I imagine you're bouncing ideas around, and it's not you just in a room like making this thing.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking more about a show that I'm creating that would be my show.
Your
but
show.
Succession was fun, but yeah, the pressure wasn't there in that same way. Although it was pre-breakdown, so I was in that unhealthy mindset where I felt like I really had to prove myself, and I was driving myself crazy with. I was just being really, really hard on myself when I couldn't, get Jesse Armstrong's voice exactly right, and all sorts of reasons that I found to torture myself. Yeah.
I'm really curious to ask a more banal question, just like, what is that like in a writer's room? Like, what happens? I can't imagine a group of people writing something.
Yeah. It's just in a very simple terms, it's just, it's Jesse Armstrong's show. He shows up. He has an idea for how the season is going to look in pretty broad strokes. He has some proposals for episode 1 looks like this, episode 5 looks like this. He has these ideas, and then he, for like a month, we talk about the macro of it. We talk about what happens in the season, what are the big events of the season, and what are the big events of each episode. And then we take a week for each episode where we talk through every single scene and moment in that episode, and he keeps just revising in real time. It's a co-creating of an outline, and he's the final decision maker of what that outline actually looks like. and he's just soliciting tons of ideas, and there are 2 assistants writing down everything everybody says and creating a huge document full of ideas for each episode that then he can draw on when he's writing, and anyone can draw on when they're writing their episodes. And yeah, and it's just 4 months of that.
So everybody's just calling out like lines that someone would speak.
Lines, moments. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of like, there's no actual writing. It's just talking and imagining it together. And then he assigns episodes to certain people, and they go off and write those on their own time. Yeah.
Have you found that to be a relief?
I hated it. I loved being in the room, and I learned a lot, but writing something in somebody else's voice I found to be impossible and not something that I want to do again.
So do you think making your own show will be a way of like continuing the dramatic voice, but in this other form?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just with, it would be, ideally it would be at least 50 episodes. That's what I'm designing it to be, and they would be, around an hour each. So it would be just a much longer story.
Can you tell us what it is? What's the story?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's called. Actually, it's in a very precarious place right now, so I don't want to jinx it. I need this deal to close, and yeah.
Do you envision yourself continuing to write plays?
Yes, I'm still writing plays. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone always asks me is poetry a dying art? I've been asked it for 40 years.
Right.
And I'm sure that this happens in theater, which is in some ways more constrained than poetry. And I wonder what you feel that theater might have. I mean, I have my answers for poetry, but what does theater have right now that the culture really needs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think theater is dying. I think certain institutions are dying, but I think, I don't think it's possible for theater to die because it's all you need is bodies in a room. You're not even in a room. You can be outside. It's not going to die. It's just that like off Broadway might be unsustainable. Broadway's totally unsustainable. There's these economic models behind it that might need to be revolutionized, but it's not like the government ever supported theater in the first place. So it's not, this new administration, unless the Kennedy Center. Oh yeah, I don't want to talk about this. But theater, it's impossible. I really think it's impossible for theater to die until just humanity itself is wiped out. So I think that it offers, what I was saying before about the shared appointment in this room. It's a collective experience, and at its best, I think at its best it plants a seed in everyone who's there that then they carry away with them, and it blooms in unexpected ways. Sometimes years later, it's a sacred. I think it's a sacred art form. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is my last question, then I'll open up to you guys, so think about what you want to ask. But I wonder, my best experiences of theater are so much more powerful than my best experiences of television or movies.
Right.
And I wonder why that is. Like, why? What would you say is the reason?
Well, I think it's because you're in the same room as the thing that's happening. I think, I think that if you really get swept up in it, if all the elements come together and the story really is carrying you, or the experience is really inviting you in, I think the fact that the performers are in the same room as you, I I think a psychological effect happens, that it's like, it's not just that you have access to something miraculous, like how did these people get here? How did these people in Wyoming get in front of me here in New York? Or, it's also that they're being haunted by you. I think that's the key part of it, is that the performers are also being haunted by you, that you're both pretending you're not talking to each other, but you are. And so it's very intimate. There's an exchange happening there between the audience and the performers that feels personal. I think it lodges in people's hearts. It's a relationship that is formed that, if it's successful, it's like impossible to forget. It feels like a gift.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. So I'll ask you guys questions. Anything else you want to ask? Yeah.
I have a question. When you were talking before about your art being like a complicated prayer, and you were struggling with, it seemed to me like, is it okay for me to actually kind of bring this out into the universe type of thing? If you're writing about things that you think are against kind of like what you believe in, for it to be like right actions or behaviors, is the complicated prayer you asking God if it's okay, like to give you permission to do that?
Can everybody at the back hear that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, maybe sometimes. Yeah, maybe sometimes. Sometimes it feels like a violation of. Sometimes it feels like a violation against God. Sometimes it feels like a societal violation. Sometimes it feels like a very specific violation against a certain family member. It feels like. The other thing that I didn't have in my list of why it's complicated to write about people is that people have secrets, and secrets are very, very interesting. We all want to know everybody's secrets, and they make for very good theater and television and film, and sometimes it feels like I'm telling my own secrets, other people's secrets, society's secrets. Like I'm. I don't know why, but I feel compelled to say unsayable things in my work, and so there's all sorts of layers of resistance that I need to navigate through when I put something up, because I am in my real life somebody who is afraid to be confrontational and frequently does ask for permission. Even when I get it, I still don't do it. It's so it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Hi guys. You talked about like people being the components of your writing, and like people always being unsatisfied and unsatisfying. I'm just curious, like, and this is a very broad question and very complicated, so just like it might be a little reductionist, but like, what's your like personal view of humanity as a whole, and then like, how does that, like, how do you try to either communicate that, or like kind of try to not communicate that through your characters?
That's just what we were talking about.
Yeah. Well, that's what you two were talking about. I was just sitting there.
Right.
I don't really have a view of humanity as a whole, to be honest. I get really focused on specific people and the specificities of specific people, and then I find that this interesting thing happens when people see my plays. Like, the more specific the person is, the more it resonates. It resonates with people. I find it really hard to zoom out. I talked about that a little bit in the class yesterday when I was thinking about like tragedies across the world, and how some people feel like they're able to immediately teleport to that place and imagine what everybody must be going through. And I actually feel much better at the people right in front of me, or I can do that intellectually, and I can feel some version of that, but I keep it pretty specific, and yeah.
What?
Thanks. So this is kind of the opposite of that, a hyper-particularized question. I really enjoyed that the sound from Heroes came up. I have been really fascinated by it. And I know when it originally came out, you were really resistant in interviews it being called demonic. Although it does seem like it kind of haunts Justin. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you thought about that as you've gotten closer to this unmusic. Because I don't know, I was thinking about it in relationship with when Kevin wakes up. I don't want to call it resurrection, but when Kevin wakes up from being passed out and talks about his vision, which seems kind of like the opposite of that. Sorry, this is, like I said, hyper particular.
Yeah. For those who don't know, there's in my play Heroes of the Fourth Turning, there's this really loud sound that happens 3 times that scares everybody in the play, and also ideally in the audience, and it's never really explained, and he says that it's the generator, but then later he admits that it wasn't the generator and he doesn't know what it is. Are you asking like whether it's demonic or what?
I know you resisted that before.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear you talk about it as a spiritual ancestor of what you're talking about with unmusic.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if your thinking had evolved, or what you were thinking about as you were putting that into the narrative of Heroes.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. I think that there's just an interesting thing happening, with that noise, where it's not that I'm very interested in, not even just in my own work, but in like horror movies, things like that, where the point where God and Satan meet, at times, like this movie, The First Omen, that came out last year. It's almost like, the point that it's making is that the Vatican needs the Antichrist to fuel people's, they need the demonic to fuel people's belief, to bring them back to the church, and it's this unholy, holy thing that I'm very interested in where those two things meet, where that relationship went sour between God and Satan. I think it's very moving. I think Paradise Lost is a very moving book about a relationship. So I guess the reason I push back on the demonic reading of the generator and Heroes is that that just felt too easy to me, and it felt like I wanted people to consider the possibility that it could also be angelic, and that angels could screech. What would it look like? I mean, it seems like some of those visitations in the Bible are quite terrifying, and so that's really what I was just pushing back a little. Yeah.
We have time for maybe one more question, David.
So accepting that conflict sits at the center of drama and exposing humans for what we really are is interesting. It seems to me there's just something boring about evil because it's our default. And I guess it sort of gets at your question, Chris. Maybe a contribution that theater has to make right now is to remind us of how dramatically interesting and exciting the pursuit of virtue is.
Everybody hear that back there? Yeah.
Not necessarily the achievement,
Right.
but the ambition for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've written characters who are pursuing pursuing virtue, definitely. I agree. I just that also sounds like it could get boring personally. Like, if it was just that and so clearly, obviously that the whole time, I don't know if it would be. I think that's a good. If I were only ever creating characters about really, gnarly, nasty people, that would absolutely get boring. But it's absolutely, it's the interplay between the two. And we were just talking about, what was the author, the woman who wrote the diary and the
Eddie Hillism.
Right, and she was in this horrible place on the way to Auschwitz, right? This
Westerbork, right? It was
yeah.
a transit camp.
Yeah. And she was this amazing person who devoted her life to, devoted her time there to helping people all day, every day. It was this pursuit of virtue. But the reason that the pursuit of virtue in that context is compelling and beautiful and saintly is because she's surrounded by fear and evil and terror, and I think what I'm saying is that as the writer of stories like this, I have to write all of it. So if, I can't just pursue the good, because I also have to write the bad. And that's why the prayer is complicated. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Will. It was beautiful. Yeah.